changes. So the thing that's interesting about open source is it constantly pushes value. It basically says whatever you were doing a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago that was really valuable, at some point, it's being done well enough, it's being produced broadly enough, it's being used everywhere. People still value it, but they don't value it nearly as much. And they might not value it to the point of like they're going to try and figure out how to do it themselves for less, right? They are in some sense going to take your IP, right? When the moment you give something like this away, it forces you to keep running and trying to find ways to innovate there or finding a new business model. But the value changes over time, right? I want you to assume that in this case, what you need to give away today is not necessarily everything. What you need to share with your partners is not necessarily everything. But you should assume that this process is going to continue. And whatever you hold as your most precious asset today, once you start to go open, it won't remain that way forever. Right? You will start a process where people are going to start peeling the onion. And like they can keep peeling and still asking you for the product over and over and over again. It will take them a very long time to get to the heart of it. But once they do, you need to have created some new kind of value, or you really need to be better at it than anybody else in the world, and they agree. And then they'll be happy to keep taking it from you, right? But they will push your value. Okay, we talked about licensing for just a few minutes. That's probably how we're going to spend the last few minutes of the time that I have to share with you here. A lot of us look at licensing like it's something we use to lock people into a certain kind of behavior. And I think you definitely want to drive consistent behavior with your licensing. But you should start looking at licensing as something that you use to protect each other's ability to innovate. Not your own ability to innovate, each other's ability, right? You need to start looking at licensing like, what kind of license do I need to apply to this thing that I'm sharing that will make people want to use it? That will make people say, that's got the right protections on it and the right permissions and freedoms and everything else so that I can take it and use it. If you assign a license that's overly restrictive, you'll put a lot of effort into figuring out how to do that, and then you may not get anywhere because at some point a lawyer and a set of developers are going to look at the license you've offered on that thing and say, that's just too restrictive for me. I can't make my open source bet on that. Sometimes that's an end consumer and sometimes that's a partner. But it's better if you don't look at licensing like a way to lock people in. You look at licensing as a way to basically foster constructive behavior for everybody else that's here. Behavior that makes them want to do more business with you and everybody else, as opposed to kind of locking them in. Okay, so we talked a little bit about hacking before. I'm just going to skip that. I'm just going to use this metaphor that DJ, who's sitting here, basically helped me construct. So one of you might make a reference architecture of something here and produce all of the IP and material necessary for other people to go off and modify it and hack on it, right? You might give away some cores. You might give away a fabric, a SERDES, some other things like that. You're going to launch your project and say, that's our intent, and then people are going to start bringing food. And everybody's, lots of people are going to try it and say, oh, that's great. It'd be great if the world had more of that, more of that product, right? If you follow this in OCP, there were literally people that went out and bought these servers with their weird trays and their weird racks and said, hey, that's 20 or 30% more efficient per watt than this other system that we have out there. That was the value of that system at the time, right? So everybody tried it and said it was great. And they loved it. And then they said, okay, can I have a look at everything you did to make that? Right? Now, that's where we first slowed down because our manufacturers, our partners said, no, if we tell you how all of that stuff, you'll just copy it and go find some place to do it cheaper. Right? Stuck. Right? You can't expand the potluck if you don't keep going. Right? What you want to do is get to the point where people can actually take your thing and participate in it and modify it, and then actually have permission to redistribute it. That they can doesn't mean that they will. It doesn't mean that you'll wake up tomorrow morning and they will be your arch competitor. It may be that you have different markets, even if you're building the same thing in some sense. It may be that you have a way of partnering on this and finding new value. If you can't commit to this overall model with your licensing, you'll get stuck. And people will figure out sooner or later that whether you meant to or not, you're just kind of teasing them. Okay. if you do all of this right, the next thing you want to do is build a marketplace. OCP has a marketplace website today. It's one of the keys to their growth and success over the past couple of years. And the nice thing about it is, with the organization that they formed, they market everybody's products. They have this cool branding scheme. They attach themselves to the consumer community that's in Open Compute and say, look at all this awesome stuff you can touch. And the foundation doesn't directly monetize this. They just basically have a presence in the industry that everybody really likes and wants to attach themselves to. And so sometimes it's free marketing for your products, right? And right alongside that marketplace is all this stuff that says, here's the system or the component that got produced. And right underneath it, here's all the stuff where if you really want to, just go run that design package off to another manufacturer, and you can build the same thing. Now, how many people would you guess actually just grab it, copy it, and go sell the hell out of it and steal somebody else's business? If you just handed out everything that you did to make your business work right. If you just put it online, and you didn't tell people I'm going to do it for you. You just said if you want to do it, here's the whole recipe book. How many cases of copying do you think you'd run into? I think over the course of a few years you'd run into a little bit, but on the whole you won't, because people are too busy trying to chase down their customer base and their money, and so it's pretty rare that from out of nowhere they'll just stop, spend all their energy copying you, clone your quality levels, clone your sales teams, clone your business relationships, all the rest of that stuff, and then off you go. But what this marketplace says when you build it and you say, I've also shared with you all this design information, is it says to all these consumers, if you wanted to, you could do it. Like, there's enough sort of resiliency and trust and help in the system that if you wanted to, you could. And if you wanted to change something about this, you can just pull it down, do the engineering work, and come back to me or somebody else and say, can you build this instead? Right? Odds are pretty good if you're the originator of it and they come back to you, you'll have the first right to refuse whatever it is they're proposing. So you want to build a marketplace, you want to couple it with all of this cool licensing and all of the IP that you plan to share, and just keep waving it out there in front of everybody. So just sort of want to sum this up. If you take nothing else from this talk, please remember these three things. Okay? Start with the simple stuff, like you're part of some revolution, but make it low intensity. Do the reasonable things first and make them open. You'll attract people. You don't have to do something really crazy yet. I mean, you could, but you don't have to. Just by being more open and sharing it, you're probably going to attract some business. Make sure you guys are very clear on where you're hung up. And if you keep coming back to meeting after meeting after meeting, and you're having more than 2 or 3 of the conversations you had today, you need to get those things out of the way. Or, it's going to be really hard for you to make progress. You're not going to get a good return on your time invested. Then the last thing is, you need to keep leaning towards more openness. You need to remember that onion. You need to remember that not everything you have is an IP. It's not, it may be something you value about yourself, but it's not what your customer necessarily values. And that your value is going to get pushed over time. But that's healthy and you have time for that. Okay, last thing. If you want to become part of OCP and join the rest of our community, we have some licensing agreements and some modes of development that you can leverage that are trustworthy enough for all the partners and suppliers that we have today. And there are, just as a matter of kind of talking about what else is possible here, there are systems out there today that have some sort of open licensing on them all the way down to what's in the chips, right? And they're compatible with those organizations. So I worked on something that was open power related for 2 generations of systems. If you're an open power member and an OCP member, you have a nice compatible licensing set there. And you can work with both of those communities and get an awful lot of traction and value out of it. So you've got with an OCP the capacity to partner. You've got licensing agreements if you want to solo deliver something. If you want to work with a multi-party group on a very open-ended development engagement, there's licensing material and contribution agreements for that. If you want to have a multi-party focused approach that's closed-ended, where you agree on first principles, like we're all going to do this together, we're committed, we're signing on a dotted line, and then we go till we're finished, so it's not so open-ended, you can do that too. And then once you're done with the thing and you're giving it away, if you want to engender a certain type of industry behavior, you can apply an OCP restricted license, which is viral, it's GPL-like. That means people that use it or modify it are going to get, by choosing to do so, they're going to have to play a certain way with you and everybody else. Or if you don't want to scare your customers off, for those that don't like the viral licenses, there's also a BSD style license. We've tested these with Apache licenses, with RAND licenses, and others, and by and large they're compatible. I think if you have your legal teams take a look at them, certainly they may say, we don't like some of what we see in there, we have some criticisms, but if you're asking are these licenses fundamentally compatible, they will tell you yes. Right? So you can keep yours or you can borrow something else, and you can work with the OCP community. And OCP doesn't care if you contribute something to them and you do it across multiple licenses, as long as they agree those licenses are fundamentally compatible. So it's, in that sense, it's like Linux is GPL and some Linux applications are Apache. And this can work together in a common distribution. That's all I have to say. I'm happy to take some questions if you guys have any over the next, I think I have about 10 minutes.